All right, welcome everybody. Today is yet another special session. And for this, I have Subramanian with us. So we go back, quite a few years. I actually met him in a public workshop, which they were doing in Hyderabad, maybe I think about 13, 14 years ago, at least. And then, 11, 12 years.
11 years, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And, I liked, what they were doing. And then immediately, I kind of got them into the organization that I was, heading HR for at that point of time. So, and it's been an interesting, kind of journey. I've been in many of his sessions as a participant, and I also looked at him for, advice several times. And one of those things that he actually said in one of the workshops was that, just stop following the news. And when he mentioned that time, I was actually reading about 4 to 5 newspapers, and weekends, half a day would go and just, scanning through everything so I don't miss out on anything that's happening. And maybe within a couple of years, at least for the last 7, 8 years for sure, I've just stopped following the news and still survive pretty comfortably. And, that whole thing, just in terms of what it's done for my mind space, is just phenomenal. And thank you, Subramanian, for that, kind of thing that you made over there. And at that point in time, I thought it was funny. How can somebody not even follow the news? It's like ridiculous, right? So, but then, over time, slowly, I kind of started reducing and just stopped at, many, many years ago. So I, kind of attribute that to you. So welcome, and just a little bit more about Subramanian and what he does. He's an OD consultant. He's worked, he has about 25 years of corporate and consulting experience, 25 plus years, I think. And he's worked with several organizations in terms of their, especially on their effectiveness, leadership, trust, and in driving growth as well. And he's a certified leadership coach, and he uses this, I don't know if it's called a methodology or, what we exactly call it, but called Neurogetics. And it's a good, combination of, I think, coaching philosophy with neuroscience, which is, which is new. And I think the key thing when I spoke to him earlier was that its ability to transform people at a much faster pace than the traditional methodology of coaching. And that's what kind of stood out for me in their whole methodology. And I thought that was really interesting for us to also know and kind of get a hang on. Apart from that, he's a keynote speaker. He speaks in different kind of forums, and he's also a certified practitioner in building trust. And that's, again, a workshop that I've attended and, kind of gone through what he does. And that's an extensive, kind of piece of work that he also does. I would certainly call him an expert in trust, especially with respect to corporates. And, when I met him, he was based out of Singapore, but I think off late he's, kind of more in India, but he still does his shuttling between both locations. So he has clients there and he visits and so on. So that's just a brief. There's lots more that's interesting, but I'll kind of pause there and just pass it on to Subramanian and say that, is there anything that you'd like to add with respect to your kind of profile, and then we'll start off the conversation.
Thank you, Sriram, and thank you, and hello to everyone who is on the call. And I'm excited to explore the same topic that I've discussed many times, but with a completely different audience. And every audience has their own perspective, and I always am open to share certain aspects or learn certain perspectives. Having said that, I should also say that Sriram and me, like he rightly said, go back 11 years. And that was a time when I was in Singapore and we were kind of positioning ourselves in the Indian market. And we had invited Sriram amongst other HR. And Sriram and me at that time didn't know each other, We were total strangers, and we had about an hour and a half session. And Sriram was sitting through that discussion where we're discussing more about the trends that we are expecting to see within the space of human resources and stuff like that. And at the end of it, we kind of made a, shall we say, soft pitch about what we had to share. And very unexpectedly, and I'm always grateful, and he has a special position in terms of Renergetics opening up its or positioning itself in India, was his organization then, and him was the first one to give us the break. So Sriram, at that time, I want to highlight one word that we are going to discuss today, was that somewhere, somehow, he saw and he had trust in what we were talking about. So that's how this relationship has grown. And it's interesting how we take that leap of faith, we take that risk, we give that trust. And then when it is reciprocated, both the ends, you form a relationship, you form a long relationship. And I think I respect him for many more other things because we've had many discussions over the years. So that's how it is. Neurogetics is an approach. It's we don't say it's coaching because it doesn't take the approach of a coach and a coachee. I have been an executive coach for a very long time. And I think over the years, we started realizing that Neurogetics gives us way more accelerated results in far more deeper internal changes that we would like to make. So thank you again. Thank you for the opportunity, Sriram, and excited to have
Good
and share.
So I think thank you. And we on that note, let's just kind of people are obviously curious about the word neurogetics itself. So you can just tell us your story of how you got into neurogetics and what it's all about, and then from there we'll just move into trust.
Thank you. So in the last 12 years, Renergetics Consulting has been in the space of OD, training, coaching, and anything that is, shall we say, significant in bringing about changes or bringing about significant changes in the space of people development or organizational development. For the last 5-6 years, myself and Jessica, my co-founder, we have been experimenting. We have been toying combinations of coaching, combinations of NLP. We also started digging deeper into neuroscience and what does it say and all of that. And somewhere along the way, we started realizing that we were doing something unique that was bringing about significant changes in people. And we were thinking that maybe we were lucky with some of those things. But as the years passed by, we started realizing that the way we were diagnosing and the way the combination of tools that we ended up using was the reason why people were finding significant shifts. And these shifts were not small shifts. These shifts were significant in terms of people seeing their life trajectory change. And we started then realizing that there is something that we have here, and we started researching a lot, and we started realizing that we seem to be using a whole lot of neuroscience learnings in our own way, using tools of NLP, cognitive behavior therapy, and various other combinations of that. And we realized when we had enough clients who were coming back with referrals that we had a unique approach to this that was very unique to us. And then we went and trademarked it as Neurogetics. And Neurogetics, one reason of having neuro was it was clearly neuroscience based, and Renergetics was already there. So we said we'll combine the first part of neuro and add the getics to it, and we had our own coined word of neurogetics. That's how neurogetics came into being. And we've kind of walked away from the ICF style grow model coaching. We focus on neurogetics more and more, unless there is a specific client who wants to do just the ICF style coaching. So that's how the neurogetics came about.
I think we'll delve a little deeper into, what exactly goes into that methodology, maybe a little later. But, for starters, let's just start with the basics, of trust. So, often people, when they're talking of trust, it's a feeling-based expression, saying I trust or I don't trust, right? But when we actually delve into trust, it's not a single pointed, kind of thing. It has multiple elements within it. And, you have your character, you have your, kind of communication and capability. And in fact, even that simple thing that trust has these parts is not something which is, obvious to people. If you ask people saying, oh, I don't trust my manager. Okay, but why don't you trust the person? It could be because he's not fair, or it could be because he's not competent to review my kind of work, or it could be because I don't get communication on time. So multiple aspects to it. But even that simple thing of why I don't trust is not something that people actually kind of get into. So I want to start with that, and then kind of get you to speak about the basics of trust, and how people should approach the whole idea of trust.
Sure. So we have this so-called programmed thought about trust, where we have been, right from the childhood, we have heard this dialogue of saying, once the glass is broken, once there is a crack in the glass, you can't rejoin that glass. And people attribute that metaphor to trust. Now, I have been in corporate for over 25 years, to almost 30 years. And it's interesting that in that entire 30 years, I don't seem to recollect a single instant where both parties have sat down together and talked about trust between us, whether it is trust from me or whether it is trust from the other party. And when I heard about this American couple give this keynote on building trust, that was the first thought that struck me. And I was asking myself, we all agree trust is important. We all agree trust is at the core of anything and everything we do. But even more interesting is, I haven't come across a single discussion which is focused on building trust. Just focused on building trust and saying, okay, let's talk about why is there an absence of trust. In fact, we don't take the word trust when we discuss issues. Whether it's performance-related issues, whether it is disconnects, conflicts, working in silos, even if we say, I do not trust that person, when I go and talk to that person, I don't just pick up the word trust in my discussion. So what is trust? Trust is very difficult to be defined. And why is that? Because it's complex. So there are many researchers who have researched on trust, and they have 95% of them kind of come back with some aspects of behavior that is impacting trust. So I think behavior clearly is impacting trust, and the research has clearly accepted that fact. What is difficult is because trust means different things to different people. If you're coming late, I could feel you're not trustworthy. If you're, let's say, being late to a meeting twice, third time, I would say, I can never trust this person to be on time. Now, it all depends how finicky you are with regards to the factor of being on time. So for me, a 3 times late or a 4 times late could become a major issue. And I'll say, I can't rely on this person. While for someone else would say, come on, we are in a city like Hyderabad or Bangalore or Mumbai, and 5 minutes is an acceptable cushion that everyone will give. So there are two parties. There is a behavior that happens, and that behavior gets interpreted very differently by these two parties. And because of that, trust is complex. Trust is abstract because we are not saying this will give us trust. We don't have an agreement written, forget written, even in our mind. We are not sure what builds that trust. And trust is provocative. Why is it provocative? Because either if it's a positive thing, it would create a lot of good emotions, a lot of positive results and response. But if it is breaking trust, or if it is reducing the trust levels, then it's going to be emotionally negative. People are going to get upset. People are going to get angry. People may get hurt. So because of the nature of trust, there are multiple researchers who have done research. There won't be a single definition that we can go down and say that's what is trust. At the best that we could say is these are the behaviors that will help build trust, and these are the behaviors that break trust.
All right, we will go a little bit into those behaviors, as we progress. I think, you brought up one of the things that I've also been trying to get corporates to pay attention to, which is on the idea of agreements. And if you see any successful relationship, there is an expectation from each other. When those expectations are met, it's a happy relationship. But the fact is that the clarity on expectations needs work. And if you see a successful relationship, that is there, that in some form, there is an agreement, which is, which need not be written, but there is an agreement of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, where the, kind of borders are and what you cannot cross and what you can, and so on. So I think that whole idea of agreements is something which is missing in, especially the context of teams, right? Which is that, okay, we want teams to behave in a certain way. But first is, what kind of behaviors do you want them to demonstrate consciously? And have you gotten them to agree on it? If you see both are missing, but then you have problems. You have problems of collaboration, you have problems of morale. And then you come running saying, oh, I have a problem, fix the problem. But the fact is that, okay, did you tell people that collaboration was important in the first place? Right? And most times that piece itself is, kind of missing. So let's kind of now get into the, a little bit of an organizational perspective and say that everybody, if you see any, kind of analysis, obviously, we know that trust is critical as a thing. But in your experience of working with organizations, do you see enough evidence that investment is going into trust building on an active basis?
So here is a couple of points here with respect to is there enough effort and investment happening in this place of trust. I think a lot of organizations I see are wanting to evaluate, assess themselves from an employee engagement perspective, from a great place to work perspective. And I think that is happening. But when it comes to when they find trust scores not at the levels that it should be, I'm not sure what kind of efforts or investments is going on within the organization. My experience tells me that the best performing let's talk about the best practices or the best performing organizations. If we were to do, and we have done many trust assessments with these organizations, when we do trust assessments with the best of the best, and let's say a high performing team, one of the most recurring behaviors boils down to, surprisingly, managing expectations. It's not even at the level where we are discussing saying, did you say you had to be collaborative? It's not even at that level. I think people are doing all of that. People are, let's say, a well-intended leader wanting to upskill himself and his team and empower his team. Everything is, the intent is there, but the result don't seem to be happening. And that is purely because of a simple and a very small issue of when we communicate, are we communicating explicit enough? Because when we are familiar with a particular team member, the understanding, the presupposition that we come with is he understands me or she understands me. And when you go with that understanding and you say, she trusts me and I trust her, and all of that is there, there is a sense of belief from the communicator that she's gotten it or he's gotten it. But between my understanding and between the receiver's understanding, that's the gap that they're dealing with, where I believe it's been communicated. The receiver also believes it's communicated until a point in time when everything comes up into a question and both parties come into a discussion of saying, I thought I had communicated this to you. And the other party would say, I also thought I understood what you were saying. This is what it is. So that's where the implicit versus the explicit communication pops up. And depending on the recurring factor of this issue, let's say it happens only once, let's say, and it's not so critical, trust may not get destabilized. But if this happens recurring enough, and if it becomes significant for the organization or the team, trust starts getting impacted. And that's the most frequent occurring issue that we see with the best of the best organization. Let's talk about trust in general. Are the organizations wanting to make an effort in that space? Yes. Do they make an effort? A little. But trust is, when you are talking about increasing trust, you're talking about changing behaviors.
Right.
And it's not going to come with 1, 2, 3 interventions. It's not going to happen with 1, 2, 3 days of intervention. It requires a consistent period over 7, 8 months for organizations to start seeing the shift in the behaviors. There has to be a constant revisiting, monitoring, acknowledging of the behaviors that are being seen, that are supposed to change. Are they being vulnerable enough to admit that they missed it? And when that happens, with a little bit of at least 7 months, 6 to 8 months is what we have seen. If organizations are willing to take and hold that, commit themselves to work through that time frame, trust will kick in. There will be significant tangible results. And we are talking about trust not being intangible. We're talking about trust measurable, both quantity and quality. And so they start, as there is a baseline assessment which gives them that starting point. And after 6, 7 months or 8 months, you see that there has been a tangible shift, not just in the trust scores, but sales goes up, bottom lines improve, cost reduces, and all the related behaviors, silos getting broken down. People are more open to take feedback, open to give feedback, both upwards and lateral. So all that starts kicking. The other real challenge for leaders and CXOs is this. If they start running a program on building trust, it's a double-edged sword. It will cut both ways. And so when we see CXOs jumping and getting excited with not much of discussion, the first thing that I do with them is I say, you've got to realize that this is going to impact your credibility and your branding as well. Not just the positive results in the team, because he has to or she has to walk the talk. So it is we have to be careful in not getting into an organization where it starts getting negatively impacted for a CXO who is not yet ready to walk the talk. And that becomes another challenge. Of course, time.
2, 3 follow-ups on that particular. First is, so in a typical relationship, who extends trust first, especially if there is a hierarchy involved?
research says trust starts with you, whoever it is. If it's a question of first or second, I think there's no second. It's only first. It starts with you. Whoever is discussing this, it starts with you. It's reciprocal. When you give, you get. You can never, and I think many of us agree with this, you can never say, give me trust first and then I'll reciprocate. So trust, we always say trust starts with capital YOU.
But in the context of the organization, where you want a culture of trust being propagated, how does the organization go about it?
That's a good point, and I think you are kind of sensing what that needs to be. Trust has to start with the top level. Trust has to start with the CEO, and it has to be at the culture level, because even if they want trust to kick in, it has to become culture. It will become culture when leaders start behaving, showing behaviors that will build trust, showing behaviors, intentionally showing, practicing behaviors that will build trust. And when they become intentional about it, and when they start practicing those behaviors, at some point in time, they have to show courage to take those behaviors forward. Example, if they have committed a mistake, they have to be open about it to say, yeah, looks like I made a mistake. And that requires not just courage, but that requires leaders who are secure in their positions.
So actually, we had an example in one of my organizations where, there was a sick leave policy that we had, and that had 12 days. And what was happening was, from October onwards, the average would go up. Till October, it would be at around 3 to 4. And then October to December, which was the end of the year, suddenly it would, kind of go up to, about 6 days people would take. So the average in the end would come to between 10 to 11. So obviously, we thought this is not going in the right direction, but, how do we change it? So we took a, fairly radical, approach and said, okay, let's try and use trust. And we made it unlimited sick leave, and just opened it up, saying that if you're really sick, there's no limits. You can take any number of days that you want, and we will pay you for the days that you're taking, even if it's a month or two. And then, of course, there were a little few cases of people misusing it as well initially. But what happened the first year, the average dropped to about 7.5. And then we thought, okay, that's almost about 2.5 to 3 days lesser than what it was, kind of thing, despite a few cases of abuse. But over the next almost, I think, 4 to 5 years, it stayed at, around 7 for the entire organization, and the organization was growing as well. And I think that was a great validation of, where you extend trust and show a little bit of resilience, because there is going to be some, abuse that you may have to encounter. Most times people anticipating the abuse, I think you don't want to trust most times, right? So I see that, that happening in a lot of, kind of companies as well, because you just don't want it to kind of get out of hand, and you take preventive measures in a way. And that was a great example for us itself on, that when you extend something, people do respect. And this is at scale. We're not talking of 5, 10 people, right? We're talking scale. And people do respond to it when they see, that there is something that's been given to them. Any stories from your end which resonate, or which you'd like to bring up?
So once you see the trust factors growing, once they start practicing the trust building behaviors, I think you will see the numbers going to the levels that you want, and especially when it comes to ethics and trust and the right behaviors. I think once people start having this relationship where both of you have that unsaid commitment to saying that I will keep up the trust and I'll follow the behaviors, which is also being in some form and shape being truthful and transparent and all of that. you will start seeing, like you gave an example of the sick leaves being the case, starting to improve. When we go to the organizations, organizations have much larger issues before us. They want to look at the silos, people working in silos. They want to look at the productivity, people not giving the performances that they're capable of. They want to build that collaborativeness and let people experiment and bring out the innovation, the creative side of them, and which will actually help the top line and the bottom line. So invariably, when we get into the clients are very much focused in that space. But the side effects of following the trust behaviors is you will also see these factors improving. More and more numbers go in the direction that it needs to move, and very little of people abusing the procedures or the policies, because there's way more trust between their boss, their teams, their peers. And that itself brings about, shall we say, a behavior where you don't anymore need to fudge any of your reasons, shall we say that way. You don't need to appear to take a leave from the quota of the sick leave. Why? Because you can easily say, I have a pressure at home. I'll manage the work. I may be off for 4 hours, 5 hours. And I think both sides will give in despite the policy not encouraging some of these behaviors. And when you have that sort of a freedom and when you have that sort of a psychological safety, you will see that those are no more, shall we say, the point of references for you, because the organization is seeing significant improvements in the performance, significant improvements in the collaboration. People are way more ready to take risk. Why? Because they know that their seniors are going to support their decisions. And that is going to go way more, shall we say, in the right direction, where organizations may not have to worry about the smaller stuff like sick leave or any of those. Are they using the policies appropriately? Is the travel expense report coming as clean as they should, or et cetera, et cetera? And all the complicated controls that we have in place in the organization for them to behave, I think those and all will start becoming meaningless or not required.
Talk a little bit about the behaviors. I think we've kind of touched upon it a few times. So, in terms of specific trust building or trust breaking behaviors, what would be the top ones which you would kind of ask people to focus on?
Okay, so I'm gonna flash a model that we tend to leverage quite a bit because we have a global license with them. This is what we call as the Reina Trust Building Framework, which talks about 16 behaviors. So I'm gonna flash that for the benefit of the audience here, and we could share that and discuss. So there are 16 behaviors, and there are various authors who have talked about 8 behaviors, 12 behaviors, and all of that. But I think end of the day, all of them agree that there are 6 behaviors that are at the crux of building the trust. Paul Zak takes the neuroscience approach and says that oxytocin is the brain chemical that is responsible for building collaborative behaviors and trust. And then he goes to saying that if you want oxytocin levels to increase, then he talks about 8 behaviors. So let's look at these behaviors. Now, what we have with this model is we are basically talking about 6 or 3 dimensions in which these 16 behaviors fall in. There is reciprocity as one of the expectations, where you start showing trust and it's reciprocal. It's incremental. So trust doesn't pop in suddenly all out of the blue. It's incremental over the period, consistently practiced. And when you get into looking at the three aspects of trust, the three C's as we call it. You have the behaviors that speak about the character, you have behaviors that enhance the communication, you have behaviors that talks about and deals with capability. And these are the aspects which is categorized under the character aspect of it, where even managing expectations, because when it comes to managing expectations as a leader, it is your responsibility to ensure that the communication or the expectations that you have is communicated as good and as effective as you can be. So you got to avoid all those suspense, implicit, explicit disconnects that may be that could occur at some point in time. So managing expectations comes under character. Establishing boundaries very clearly helps that, because you want to ensure that you draw boundaries of saying what's in, what's out, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. Delegating appropriately, where the aspect of character kicks in and saying, are you ensuring that when you delegate certain activities, are you taking the ownership for the success of your team member? Encouraging mutually serving intentions, so that it is win-win and increases the trust. Keeping agreements, and I think we spoke about a little bit about that before, and being consistent. So these are the aspects that comes with character. Now, one of the most recurring issues that we find across all organizations is managing expectations. And that is a clear case where consistently, time and again, despite the best of the best practices, despite the performances being good, that particular behavior always pops up. Sharing information is another area where there is always a debate, there is always a dilemma, how much to share, how much not to share, confidential, private, etc., etc. Tell the truth, admit mistakes, give and receive constructive feedback. That's another space which again gets flagged frequently enough. Giving happens more relatively better. Receiving feedback is a space that many, many leaders struggle. And if you want to build trust, and if you want it to be fair and transparent and both ways, where both the parties kind of get the right outcomes out of what we are planning to do as a team, then receiving constructive feedback kicks in. Speak with good purpose is a very unique aspect of RENA model, where I think one of the intent of the entire approach towards building behavior trust is that both parties, where if one of them is triggering a discussion or a conversation, they would come in and say, I want to speak with good purpose, or they would have the intent for sure, but the receiving party will also understand that the discussion is being triggered for the sake of a good purpose, a good outcome beyond that particular discussion or topic. And then you have the capability. And here, obviously, do you trust the capability of your team member? Are you acknowledging abilities and skills, allowing people to make decisions? And many a times when you think about people not delegating enough or allowing people to make decisions, if you go down deeper into the leader's reasons for not doing it, it boils down to trust, trusting their capability, or it could also be a kind of a bias which they weren't consciously aware. And capability also includes involving others, seeking their input, helping people learn skills. So this is the RENA model, where this particular couple, Dennis Reyna and Michelle Reyna, spend literally their lifetime, 30 plus years. They have just done a research on building trust in the workplace.
I think I just want to, because this is a heavy slide, and obviously, you do a much longer workshop just to, kind of explain this whole thing. But I want to bring in the audience and see if, there's anything that they would like to ask specifically on this point. And then we'll get a little bit into the neurogetics part as well, a little bit of neuroscience and neurogetics. Yeah. Any questions that you'd like to ask on the model or in general so far to Subramanian?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Very, very insightful. Yeah, I'm a practitioner, coach, as well. One line question: how much influence does psychological safety have on trust?
Trust is psychological safety is there only when trust is there. They both are the same in many ways, and one can't exist without the other.
And
Meaning, if my relationship is built on trust, only then I'm going to feel the psychological safety.
Right. So it could trigger from either side.
Yeah, it can't be, psychological safety can't be prescribed or preached until I feel it. And for me, if I feel it, then I need to see an evidence of that in the past behaviors.
Right. Thank you. Great.
Anyone else at this point? Again, we'll open it up again a little later, but at this point, if there are any questions, we'll take it and then move forward. Okay, I think, while people are, kind of thinking of stuff. So I want to go into the neuroscience angle. You brought in the oxytocin a little bit as a thing. So what is really your opinion on the connection of neuroscience and trust? And is there anything that we can do to leverage neuroscience to, kind of help with trust?
Yeah, we do that, and I and Jessica definitely believe that there is a clear connection where neuroscience can be leveraged, not just for trust, for a whole lot of stuff. Now, think about. Let me give you an example. I do not trust people based on my past experiences, right? Most of the time, and research says that how much trust does one person give is also dependent on the capacity of trust that I have. So think of capacity of trust like a fuel tank. Is it a 5-liter tank, or is it a 7-liter tank, or a 10-liter tank? And how much is the fuel in that tank? So each person has different capacity. But when it comes to neuroscience, very clearly our choices, our decisions, are guided by our past experiences. And if my past experiences have been good, I would pursue that particular direction or that particular space. But if my past experiences have been bad, traumatic, or unpleasant, I will hesitate, depending on the intensity of my experience, I will hesitate to take a decision, or I will not even consider that decision. What neuroscience helps us to do is reset these bad experiences. When I say reset these bad experiences, let me explain that. You're not going to walk away from the memories of the bad experiences. You're not going to forget those memories. But the feeling that it triggers, when I think about a bad experience in the past, the feeling those bad experiences trigger in me, I can reset that feeling. I can reset it to a neutral. I can, once it becomes neutral, what the mind does or the brain does is it resets it to the point of giving a new meaning to that past experience. For example, if I have had a breakup and it's been so bad and so traumatic that I decide I'm not going to go and have any relationship henceforth. Now, that's because that has been your experience, and the intensity of it was so much that you don't want to bear and go through all that. But once I reset those emotions, or the impact of those emotions, when it resets, it also resets with another meaning to that experience, where it could be, depending on the individual, it could be saying that, well, this person was not the right person for you, or this person had certain behaviors that were not aligned with your values. And so then you get that clarity, you get that, shall we say, larger, big perspective on that incident, event, person, because you're now emotionally disconnected. You don't have emotions attached to that event or the situation or the person, and you're able to step back and see what exactly happened. And when you relook at that, you attach a new meaning to it that's going to be far more empowering, which means you're going to take lessons from it. You're going to remember the memory, but the bad emotions that was manifesting in your body, sometimes you, as soon as you would think about that or somebody would mention about it, it would trigger, shall we say, a knot in the chest. That will not occur again. So your experience, the new experience of the same incident is going to be neutral. And when you do that, it could do many things for this person. The person opens up, there is a new wiring, as we call it, because a new wiring has to happen for you to be able to see that from a very different, disassociated perspective, and then be able to take in all inputs from all sources, even if it was bad in the past. You're now re-looking and reassessing those options and taking that decision, including whether I should trust this person or not.
So now this is in the context of the organization, I'm thinking now, if somebody comes with some baggage, as you kind of put it. So now, typically as leaders or managers, we operate with a certain frame of behaviors which have worked well for us. And of course, those have not worked. It's obvious because, but what has worked for us, we continue to propagate and repeat. Now, what you're saying is that somebody who has a trauma may actually take offense to one of our behaviors, which has worked for us in the past, right? And now, how does of course, what you're talking is the individual can be reset when they come to you, that too, but otherwise, in a generic thing, how do we deal with it in the context of a work setting where, obviously I have as a leader, I don't have any idea of what baggage somebody is kind of holding on to, and I am doing something out of goodwill, something which I think is fair. But if the person, because of their past experiences, thinks that that's not a fair behavior, one is, how do we sense it, and what do we do?
So there are a couple of ways to sense it, and there are some ways that we deal with this in a different way. Let me share that. So you find certain people, despite feedbacks, not making an effort in a particular direction. It could be delegation, where they have a fear of losing authority, or it could be risk-taking that you need in this person, but this person is not wanting to take the risk. And each of these cases, when you have given adequate feedback and you're not seeing them not taking that step, at some point in time, we as a leader, we will easily be able to say, does he want to make an effort, or is he making an effort or trying? Is he convinced enough to try, or is he just closed to the entire thing? Is it an attitude issue, or is it something where he's unable to do that? And that distinction, many times we are able to make. Once you have that distinction, we step in and we help these people. But let's talk from an organization perspective. At a CXO level, one of the behaviors of trust is you got to show vulnerability in your area. And why do you need to show vulnerability? Because you're encouraging that behavior across the organization. Now, we had an instant where the CFO of this organization, the CEO came to us and said he wants to fire the CFO because he's not getting the kind of outcomes from this CFO that he expected to have. When we had a discussion and conversation with this CFO, we realized that there was an incident way back in his early 30s where he had a traumatic experience where he fell into a kind of a hole which was very traumatic, and that triggered a fear of darkness. But that fear ended up manifesting in many of his decisions as well. When he had to make tough decisions, he would kind of get into this space of not taking a position, not being decisive. And that's exactly what the CEO was finding it as an issue. And once we identified that seemed to be impacting this CFO, It was a complete turnaround after that. What was a case of firing somebody, that person changed so much that he was way more effective, way more performing from that perspective. From an organizational perspective, how do we deal with this? If I could again go back to the main question, we start with working with CXOs as the step one. Why? Because we want to ensure that the behavioral aspects of each CFO or each CXO is ready to make that impact in the organization. And in that, we have our own, we go with a coaching approach to it. But at some point in time, we may even leverage Neurogetics when we come across a case like this, where we find that there may be a need at a deeper unconscious level to fix some of these behaviors. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think, I get a sense. I want to kind of go back to Neurogetics, and I think we've touched upon it, with respect to the reset as well as the example of the CFO. I want, to talk a little bit in detail about what exactly, is different in your methodology, and to give the audience an understanding of what goes on. If they, really want to engage with you, then what really happens, what's different. And then I think we'll pause there and then open it up to the audience post that.
Sure. So you want to pause now, or you want me to talk about?
After you've spoken about the Neurogetics.
Yeah, so Neurogetics essentially leverages predominantly the concept of neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity, to say in simple terms, if you do certain things n number of times, 1,000 million times, then it changes, it creates a new neurology because you've created a new behavior or a habit. And that starts impacting your results because you're now doing something way more consistently, and that's giving you. So what we do with Neurogetics as a step one is we do what we call as diagnostics, where we have a conversation. It's not an assessment questionnaire or anything. We just have a 60-minute discussion with the client. And in that, the focus for us is, given the client's need, what are the current patterns of behavior? What are the current patterns of issues? What has been the responses to certain decisions? We look at what is the limiting factors for them, whether it's emotional, what is their relationship with finance, if finance is their perspective. And then we identify 2 or 3 key aspects that are impacting their trajectory. So at the end of it, if you have a pattern of behavior, pattern of thought, pattern of belief that has been given to you through your life experiences, through your parents, etc., you carry a certain, shall we say, a program that programs you to go in a particular direction. Right. It influences you to take particular steps, decisions. Why? Because that pattern of belief, behavior continues to recur. Now, if you were to do an AI analysis, theoretically, if suppose we were to plot a data point, and nowadays we discuss AI so much. If you were to plot all the data points, the AI will give you a trajectory. It will say, if you continue to do it this way, this is your trajectory. And then what we do is we pull out some of these that are slowing down this life trajectory and work on these at an unconscious level, at a subconscious level. Why? Because they are very deep. Example, there was a trauma for this for this businessman, where the father had significant financial losses in the business. The mother continued to tell him that anything you get, if you haven't put enough effort, and if you get too much of money with not much of effort, then that money is not going to stay with you. So that's ingrained in him from childhood. The trauma of the father going through all the losses, the related issues, the legal issues, and all of that being traumatic. His relationship with finance also has not been good. It has impacted, it has continued to impact it. And he seems that like something is holding him back in his current business. He's in his mid-40s now. And that's impacting him. But he doesn't realize that those are the reasons why he's going through all the issues that he's encountering. And when we eliminated those issues from him, from a memory reset or the emotional reset, all that started clearing up. The businesses started growing up, growing faster. He was capable, but these factors were holding him back, but that no more happened to hold him back. So we figure during the diagnosis, what are the 2 or 3 strategic changes that this person needs, you need, and then we work on those 2, 3 aspects of it. Our approach is not hourly or number of sessions. Our approach is outcome based. We give you the results. We take responsibility for the results. And so we deliver those results, and people are seeing significant shifts in their trajectory.
And I know based on our discussion that, you've had some really significant changes that you've had with your clients where it's been completely life-changing. So I do believe, that it works. Now,
so let me, that's a good prompt for me to give some examples of what sort of significant aspects happen here. And I'm going to give very extreme ends of the case and not the typical corporate cases, just to highlight as to what is the ability of this neurogetics approach. 70-year-old man, clinically given up because he has paralysis on one side. Clinically, they have given up and said nothing can be done. 120 minutes of discussion with this 70-year-old man. He starts walking. His muscles are not strong enough, but he is able to walk, a little limping, but he makes the move, walks until the door from the bedroom to the main door. And then, of course, he continues to progress and then comes out of it. A 21-year-old data scientist comes to us, and during the discussions and diagnosis, we ask what is her expectation, and she says 5 minutes of peace. Why? Because she has had multiple psychological complications, which has led to her taking a huge list of medicines, and the psychiatrist on top of it also tells her that she has to take these medicines lifelong. And when he says that to her, a little hope that she had from the psychiatrist disappears, because she now believes there's no hope. She gets into depression and she comes to us. Being a clinical case, obviously, we do not give any guarantee because we're not doctors. We say we will try, but we will need 12 months. And we start working on her. In 4 months' time, she's off the medicine. In the first 3 days of each day, about 4 hours that we worked with her, after first 3 days, that 5 minutes of peace is no more an issue. And by the end of the 5th month, she was ready. 6 months, she gets married. It's been 8 months now.
Wow.
So that's the extreme, shall we say, very unexpected examples. Let me add here, as a person who has been in corporate for 30 plus years, these were a lot for me to accept. Accept as in, are they, because I would throw them away or shoo them away by saying hocus pocus or a mumbo jumbo. And it took 5 years or 6 years working with my co-founder, Jessica, who is innately talented in that space, to realize that there is a methodology to it. And it's not just a toss. There's a methodology, there is ability to trigger the results consistently, and able to give results which are significant, to say the least. Our average time with any client hasn't exceeded 6 months.
I think I'll pause here. I'll open it up to the audience. I know we're almost on time. So any questions from anybody? It's open for a discussion.
So I see Monica has a question, and Monica says, those are some beautiful stories. Are these group intervention or a one-on-one? No, these are one-on-one, Monica. It has to be one-on-one for the simple reason because every individual is very different. It's tailored. It's unique to an individual. And typical duration, like I said, our experiences tells us that we haven't taken more than 6 months. But again, it depends on the complexity of that particular individual. But if it is, let's say, a corporate executive and issues around corporate, I don't think it would take more than 4 months.
But when you're saying 6 months, 4 months, what's the frequency of interaction?
Once or twice, 3 times a month or 4 times a month.
Almost once a week, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? I have lots of questions, but I'm going to pause here. I just want to open it up and think. But I think it's very interesting how you've made the shift and made the connections between the different things that you do and still deliver great results.
Yeah. So one of the biggest challenges for me was not to take it to somebody else. I had to experience it myself. And that was, shall we say, for me, I used to accept it conceptually, but to say that I'll experiment it on myself is another level. And that took a lot of effort for me because I had a lot of fears of what it will do to me. But then once I took that, I think that gave me the opportunity to get in myself. And so it's been 5 years since we've been doing
I think the satisfaction of this particular thing is so significant compared to the work that we do in corporate. If you can do even one person's life, if you're able to change permanently.
Exactly.
That's a big deal. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Last call for questions. If there's any questions, we'll take it. Otherwise, we're going to kind of close over here. Any comments, feedback, anything that anybody wants to say? This is your chance. Thank you, Chand.
Hello. I'm Senthil, and I'm a good friend of Sriram. We grew up together and we studied together. So it's been very insightful because I was looking forward to this conversation because I've had some interactions with Sriram on certain things, and it was very relevant to what I was discussing with him, and it's thrown a lot of light on what to expect. And thank you, Mr. Subramanian. It was very nice to hear you out and know what you're doing and the impact that it has had on your clients. And it's really very inspiring to know what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, big thanks and very, very thought-provoking session. I'm able to see some patterns in what I've been coaching with people and also in myself. Yes, very insightful.
Thank you. One of the comments, if I could add, was in our life, there are moments where we come across where we wish we are able to address the challenges that we're going through. And many a times we have this frame from which we think is, the frame tells us that there's only so much you can do with yourself. Mm-hmm. But I just want to remind all of us, unchain yourself from that frame, because nowadays the science has gotten to a point, the personal development, organizational development has reached a point where significant things are being able to be addressed. And the 2 examples that I gave are in that particular space itself, because it actually unchains. Anything is possible today, especially with the people have fears of XYZ, and the fears can be eliminated very quickly. The impact of a belief that is a limiting belief and not knowing that it is a limiting belief can have significant impact in your results.
I think
and how cool.
Anything is possible. I think that's a great note to finish on. And thank you, Subramanian. Thank you, everybody, for joining. It was a fantastic session. I learned a lot. I hope, people have taken away a lot of things. We're going to, of course, put this up as a recording on YouTube. We'll also send out some, snippets to people to, kind of go through some of these. Appreciate it. Thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you, Sriram, for hosting this.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Sriram, and appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you, Sriram, and thank you, Mr. Subramanian. Bye.